Laos is a landlocked country in Southeast Asia, surrounded by Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, Myanmar, and China in the north. The country has a population of less than 6 million people and is characterized by dominantly rugged mountainous terrain. More than 80% of the population is living in rural areas, where subsistence agriculture is their main occupation. Only about 3.5% of the total land area is under cultivation due to lack of arable land in lowland areas. However, the staple food crop, which is rice, is also grown in upland areas. Shifting cultivation is the prevailing cropping system for growing rice in the mountains. Forest land is cleared and then burned for rice growing. After harvesting, the fields are left for regrowth. Laos, compared to other countries in Southeast Asia, still has a large area of forest land, estimated at 47%. However, because of the low yields of upland rice, more and more land is being cleared. Government restrictions on forest clearing and population pressure contribute to ever shorter periods of fallow land. In many rural families, rice shortages have to be compensated by additional rice purchases. Due to lack of cash income for food and consumer goods, cash income is usually generated through sales of gathered forest products. Many of these non-timber forest products have become rare. Some are threatened by extinction because of overexploitation or unsustainable collection practices. Laos is considered one of the least developed countries, and the government lacks the means to manage the protection of natural resources sufficiently. In Udomxai province, in the north of Laos, bordering China, approximately 70% of its population is classified as poor. Here, a project has been implemented with the development goal to improve the efficient and sustainable use of natural resources and to upgrade the living conditions of the local people. The project is implemented in cooperation between the Provincial Agriculture and Forestry Department of Udomxai Province and German Agro-Action with the assistance of German Development Service. The project supports the development of alternatives to traditional slash-and-burn shifting agriculture by promoting permanent contour farming with fruit tree growing. Previously gathered non-timber forest products are now grown in nurseries and planted in the forest and on burned uplands. Various income-generating activities are supported, like fruit growing, small livestock production, and beekeeping. Beekeeping and honey hunting has in fact been practiced by many villagers for a long time, particularly in the north of Laos. There are 3 indigenous Asian honeybee species in Laos: the giant honeybee, Apis dorsata, the dwarf honeybee, Apis florea, and the Asian hive bee, Apis cerana. Apis dorsata, locally called pung hang, builds usually one huge comb beneath branches of trees. The honey is collected by honey hunters, but has often a high water content because it is difficult to assess the right time for harvesting ripe honey. Apis dorsata cannot be kept in beehives. Apis florea, which is called mim, also builds one comb in a thicket of small branches near the ground. Because of the small amount of honey produced, this bee is not of much interest for honey hunters and can also not be kept in hives. Apis cerana, known as pung gon, is the only local honeybee species in Laos and in fact all over Asia, which can be cultivated in bee hives. The bee is kept in log hives, which are placed along the rice stores in the village. Laos is one of the few Asian countries in which the European honeybee, Apis mellifera, has not been introduced. In Thailand, for example, the European bee is used in commercial agriculture for pollination and honey production. Longan and the weed Eupatorium odoratum are the major sources for honey. Here, it seems, the bees like music in their home. In Vietnam, Apis mellifera was introduced mainly in the south of the country, with its commercial rubber, coffee, and longan plantations. Still, in the north of Vietnam, many small farmers keep Apis cerana in their backyards. Thailand and Vietnam have become honey exporters. China is one of the leading world honey exporters and is considered the country with the most beehives in the world. China's exported honey is also produced from Apis mellifera, while in many rural upland areas in South China, Apis cerana is still kept in small farm households. However, in all these countries, Apis mellifera is not indigenous. The introduction of the European honeybee has created difficulties for the survival of indigenous bee species through food competition, new pests, and diseases. Although Apis mellifera potentially produces more honey than Apis cerana, it is not as well adapted to the local climatic conditions and the native vegetation. The European honeybee may only thrive in areas of commercial agriculture which offer suitable field crops or large fruit plantations. Furthermore, the frame hive system, which accompanies the European honeybee, needs imported expensive inputs and equipment and intensive knowledge and management skills. Apis mellifera is affected by the varroa mite, and requires permanent control and treatment. This kind of beekeeping is not manageable or affordable for subsistence farmers. In Laos, the common method of log hive beekeeping with the native honeybee, Apis cerana, is still continuing. The hives are taken empty to the forest at the beginning of the season, around December, and left for bees to come and occupy them. Once bees have settled, the beekeeper carries the hive back to the village and places them alongside the food store. The hive is not opened until harvesting is due. During the harvesting season, from March to May, the hives are lifted from time to time to assess the weight and the right cropping time. Once opened, the hive will be cropped. The combs usually crash in the operation and are destroyed. Brood, pollen, ripe and unripe honey is mixed. The queen often gets killed, and countless bees die in the subsequent messy operation. The combs often contain only a small strip of honey on top, while brood and pollen will be destroyed. Bee larvae is fried and eaten as a protein supplement. All combs are removed. Leaving some would be difficult and is not desired by the beekeeper. After that, the log hive is closed again and placed back. In most cases, the bees abscond after some days, and the circle will start afresh in the next year. The honey is usually sold at the local market. Honey in such bottles gains approximately $1.60 per kilogram and is sometimes also sold as comb honey. With increasing demand for good quality honey in urban areas, such honey is difficult to harvest with these methods of beekeeping. Beekeepers do not get a good price for low-quality honey which ferments easily. Growing villages do not provide sufficient food for the bees, and Apis cerana has only a flight range of 500 meters. Bees are usually kept in the village, but are rarely used in fields or in agriculture for pollinating crops or fruit trees. With the forest decreasing, wild bee swarms are becoming rare, and less log hives get occupied with bees. Wow! When harvesting honey, the brood is destroyed. The bees cannot stay throughout the year and cannot expand early in the season in order to produce honey. Considering these disadvantages, the project started to support beekeeping during the year 2000. The first step was to survey the currently practiced methods and to assess the role of beekeeping in livelihood systems and its importance as food and cash income. From the beginning, it was acknowledged that only the indigenous honeybee, Apis cerana, should be promoted as best adapted bee for the local environment, and the only bee manageable by small farmers who practice subsistence agriculture. While most beekeepers see beekeeping as a side activity, some have already taken up this business, developed improved methods, and increased their number of hives. The project supported farmer-to-farmer visits, in which beekeepers could exchange local knowledge and learn from fellow beekeepers new methods and techniques. In addition, training was conducted for improved methods of harvesting and how to produce clean and ripe liquid honey. Since most beekeepers were eager to learn more about new techniques, 2 top bar hives were introduced into each village. Training courses were held in bee biology, bee management, and ecology. Project staff was trained and visited the beekeepers regularly to follow up the development. In fact, the top bar hive method is a first step towards real beekeeping. Top bar hives can be opened and single combs may be moved and checked without destroying them. The top bars must have the exact width of 28 millimeters. If not, the bees will build the combs at random, and the hive will be the same as a log hive and cannot be opened without destroying the combs. Wooden top bar hives are very expensive, and the investment would either not pay off at all or only after a long period until yields rise. Therefore, the project encouraged interested farmers to make their own boxes from local materials. Training was conducted in how to transfer bees from the wild or from log hives into the top bar hives. While log hives usually get occupied by bees if they are placed near the forest, the top bar hives need to be occupied by the beekeeper himself. The easiest method is to catch a swarm of bees. The bees are brushed into a box and one has to wait until all the bees flying around have entered. The box may then be covered and transported to the empty top bar hive. In the evening, just before darkness, the bees should be shaken into the prepared top bar hive. However, in most cases, the bees will abscond during the next day. It is therefore better to find the queen and cage her for some days until the bees have started constructing new combs. Feeding is also recommended. Digging out wild bee colonies from holes in the ground may be difficult and not very promising. Still, with few bee swarms around, any means should be tried in order to get some bees into the hives. In this case, we were lucky and the queen could be caught and secured in a cage. The cardboard box is taken to the prepared hive and the queen cage tied to top bars. The queen must be released after the bees have started building combs. After the harvest of log hives, there is a good opportunity to transfer bees into top bar hives. Some combs containing larvae should be tied to top bars and fitted on top of the harvested log hive, because the bees are used to this as a home. After 2 weeks, the combs may be transferred together with the bees into a top bar hive. But in many cases, the bees nevertheless abscond because of the stress, and they do not have any honey for their survival left. 3 years after the beekeeping support program had started, a survey was conducted in order to gather information on the adaptation of the top bar hive technology and to further develop strategies and plans together with the beekeepers on how to continue. Let us now look first at the log hives which are still used by most beekeepers. According to the rating of beekeepers, most log hives are occupied with bees between December and February during the start of the bee season. However, in January, only 23% of all bee hives were occupied by bees, and many hives remained empty. Certainly, the number of available swarms varies in each year due to climate and flowering of plants. There is no evidence about a general decline of bees in the north of Laos. More research would be needed to establish the link between the natural environment, the number of bee swarms, and the prospects for increased beekeeping and available bee forage. Apis cerana is said to generate 3 to 5 kilograms of honey per year in a hive. Calculations based on interviews and given occupation rates show that in the recent past, each occupied hive has generated 1.5 kilograms of honey in the average. Over the years, it was observed that in most hives, no pure honeycombs were found. Usually, there was a strip of honey on top of the comb, while the larger part still contained lots of brood, even at the end of the season. This very low result in honey yields may be explained by various factors. At first, there is the big problem of absconding in Apis cerana with the slightest disturbance of bees or hives. Colonies often do not stay over a longer period and migrate when conditions are not favorable. Bee swarms often arrive late in the season, and there is not much time left for building up a strong colony. If there are few natural swarms available, the beekeeper with log hives cannot do anything besides wait. Management or multiplication of bees in colonies is not possible. As mentioned earlier, many communities are expanding with fewer trees being grown in the villages. As a result, the traditional way of keeping log hives in the village may not be as beneficial. In addition, most presently grown agricultural crops, like rice, are not attractive to bees. Looking at the top bar hives, first results were available from interviews and observations. Beekeepers appreciate the easy harvesting and management of bees in top bar hives. While many beekeepers still struggle and argue about different sizes and measurements of top bar hives and compare these with their log hives, many have also tried to make their own top bars, but failed to make them the correct size. Most top bars have the combs built in diagonal directions and can only be checked with great difficulties. In fact, any form of bee management has indeed not been applied or practiced. Only a few beekeepers ever open top bar hives before the harvest, and most have not yet adapted to the principle and functioning of the top bar hive system. Furthermore, many of these self-made hives fall apart when moved to the ground for harvesting, or the bees abscond because of cracks and gaps. In others, the combs cannot be lifted even if they are built correctly by the bees along the top bars because of improperly designed boxes. The tools and skills available in villages do not allow the making of functional top bar hives. Beekeepers also usually did not clean or prepare the top bars with wax starters for new occupation. There was either no beeswax available, or all these additional working steps were not seen as important or necessary. The low success rate in transferring bees to the top bar hives have resulted in many empty hives, which either rot on the ground or are used for other purposes. Keeping bees in top bar hives throughout the year can create various new problems not known in log hives. During the rainy season, wasps and other bee predators are a big problem. They may wipe out entire colonies if no care is applied or no excluders are fixed. Application of bee feeding, which may be necessary under extreme weather conditions, is expensive and also not known or accepted by beekeepers. Another outcome of the recent survey showed the problem of aging in the beekeepers' community. They usually do not have followers or assistants. The importance of further support for beekeeping is beyond doubt. Although, on first look, the benefit from beekeeping may seem minimal, the cash income is vital for all beekeepers' families. Beekeeping supports natural conservation and biodiversity. Pollination of fruits will become more and more important. The question is, with these challenges, how can we continue to support beekeeping in Laos? When asked what kind of support the beekeepers would like to receive from the project, training in improved beekeeping methods or techniques was the most desired. Gloves and veils were also requested, as well as more farmer-to-farmer visits and assistance in marketing. Consequently, the project support continued with conducting further training in basic beekeeping knowledge and methods. Swarm boxes were made and suspended in each village. The top bars were modified with a groove cut in the center, and training for making starter strips with beeswax was conducted. Protective clothes and other beekeeping gear was manufactured locally and tested by the beekeepers. Although Apis cerana is a small bee and does not sting heavily, at some occasions it can become very furious and make working at the hive almost impossible. Few experienced beekeepers do not use any protection, but most others could not be convinced to work without full gear. A training apiary with 8 top bar hives was established, and this was thought to be a model for beekeeping outside villages. This required a hive stand safe from ants and termites. Various beekeeping methods were tried in this apiary. Training for the moving of top bars with combs, the transferring of colonies to swarm boxes and vice versa, the shifting of beehives, searching and caging of queens, and many other steps was provided. In order to test the integration of beekeeping and agriculture, 2 top bar hives were set up in upland contour farming fields. Bee colonies were bought from other beekeepers, and it was hoped that the bees would find enough food in this area. In Nam Or district, beekeeping support started at a later time. Because of the high cost of wooden top bar hives, it was suggested to cover baskets with cow dung and to use top bars. The beekeeping team also assisted the beekeepers in cropping and conducted training in how to harvest ripe and clean honey. The honey was processed in the village by the beekeepers themselves into liquid honey. One of them bought all the honey using his own money and started bottling and selling high-quality honey. One government extension worker has been trained in beekeeping, and he is probably the only skilled expert in Laos who is now able to continue with practical beekeeping training. Reaching the end of the beekeeping support period during the year 2005, some conclusions have been drawn. Unfortunately, this year was a poor bee season with few natural swarms and little honey available. The major cause was most likely bad weather and little flowering of plants. However, annual fluctuations are normal and no cause for worry. The next year could be better. The swarm box trial has been a complete failure. Not one swarm box has ever been occupied by bees, although we experimented with different designs. This was probably due to the general scarcity of bee swarms, but may also be because of beekeepers' reluctance to keep the swarm boxes suspended over a longer period of time, fearing theft. At least some beekeepers took the swarm boxes to the forest and brushed bee swarms they had found into them. Top bar hive beekeeping appears not to have been a big success. Beekeepers have probably not perceived this technology as rewarding. More work, knowledge, and effort are necessary, but there is not more honey in the short run. Wax starters for top bars, here seen during the training, are not done by the beekeepers. Most beekeepers throw the comb residues away because there are simply too few. Some, however, process the combs into beeswax, but there is always a shortage. The trial in contour farming has not yet yielded good results. It seems that at present the fruit trees planted are still too young or too few in most upland farms, and other planted crops are not beneficial to bees. In the established training apiary, two major problems occurred. Firstly, it is very difficult to find bee swarms or colonies for the hives. All were bought from beekeepers with many log hives. The swarm catching campaign, in which money was offered for catching or reporting bee swarms, did only yield to wild swarms. At least it was possible to keep almost all bee colonies throughout the year without absconding. Secondly, despite many efforts to force the bees to build the combs along the top bars, there was little success, partly because most colonies were started from hives with the same problem. In our view, top bar hive beekeeping may make harvesting easier, but is not really suitable for any bee management. The random building of combs is hard to come by, and just to find and catch the queen is almost impossible. There are other and probably better designs of top bars and top bar hives. For example, free space may be used between smaller top bars. But all of this would require hives with a more complicated design made by carpenters. Beekeeping with Apis cerana faces a serious dilemma. Any input cost is too large to be covered by the income made from the small honey yields. This problem may only be overcome by an extraordinarily rich bee forage and skilled management of bees. Otherwise, beekeeping has to be subsidized for a period of time. But this may be justified with the many ecological, conservation, and pollination benefits of keeping bees. It is also much in doubt that an approach to use beekeeping as a poverty alleviation measure can be successful. The support directed to the majority of poor beekeepers who practice a traditional way of beekeeping and to hope for a change in their methods seems to be unpromising. An alternative would be to start with a small group of young farmers who may have never kept bees or with few active advanced beekeepers. However, such a project needs considerable financial resources and inputs, permanent staff, and foreign expertise for a period of 5 years or longer. The technology should be the frame hive technology, which can also work with Apis cerana, like already seen in other countries like Nepal and India.
Sometimes when you get starved, it's one.
Such an approach may lay the foundation for emerging beekeeping in Laos, which has yet to begin. Perhaps with these few beekeepers, a small beekeeping industry can develop and expand over the next 10 years. The big advantage Laos has to offer is the clean and unspoiled environment and honey from bees which has not been treated with chemicals. Such honey will be in ever-increasing demand and generate a much higher price. However, for the time being, almost all the honey is coming from log hives. The greatest success of this project is probably the establishment of a functioning marketing system. Honey of good quality is now processed in a more professional manner and sold along the roadside. the many European and Chinese tourists and truck drivers who pass this place are expected to buy all stocks in a short period of time.
Hmỏ đi chắc củ